On today's episode, we learn about why we should sympathize with Hunter Biden, that Amazon is a net negative to society, analyze whether we should subsidize roads or public transit, talk about why the Pledge of Allegiance is weird, and finally, learn that the solution to world hunger is for grocery stores to just give away all of their food for free. This is Cringe Posts. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of the Cringe Post podcast. This is the podcast where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes that we see in our feeds, and we dissect them, kind of go through them, and try to have a bit of a laugh along the way. My name's Britt. I'm here with my co-host Donnie, and before we get started, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our show. It really helps us out. Leave a comment. All of that interaction really helps us out. And if you are listening to the show on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we have a visual show companion that you can check out at cringepost.com. Now, before we like to dissect other people's cringe posts and have a little bit of a laugh at them, we'd like to have a little bit of a laugh at ourselves and dissect our past selves. And today we are dissecting some sage advice from Donald Kimball. In October of 2010, Donnie wrote, "Too many people don't listen to advice they don't want to hear, and then come crying to you when something bad happens from not taking the advice. It's rather tiring, ... Do you remember who this was about or what it was about?
No, it's just, I just really laughed really hard at seeing this from the ripe old age of 16. And I think what's funny about it is that while on the face of it, I don't think it's necessarily untrue. I think that I'm noting an observation that I think is generally true. But I think, one, posting it on social media like that is very self-aggrandizing, right? Like, oh, they always come to me with their problems and I always know how to fix them. And then they just don't listen to me, which is really cringe. But also, I think it's funny because 2010 would have been pretty early on, either my first or second year in high school, and it would have been when I say high school, I should say not being homeschooled. So my first or second year in a private school, so sort of interacting with other people daily en masse more than I was homeschooled. Now I interact with people a ton in homeschool, but it wasn't with the same. You're not spending 8 hours a day or 6 or whatever it is. And there's a lot more drama that crops up in your lives and stuff. So it's also just kind of funny that I'm like, of course, the moment I'm exposed to all this drama, I just know how to fix it all. And if they just listen to me, who apparently has the perfect solution for everyone's individual woes, then it would just be fixed. And it's just funny because a lot of the problems that I think people came to me and I gave advice for, I probably wouldn't have even been able to act myself. It's very easy to give advice. It's not very easy to enact the advice that you give, though. So all those things kind of add up to a very, very pretentious view of myself that I think is really cringe to publicize.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you publicized it means that you are not a person of wisdom that has any advice to offer, right? Like it's a sign of that maturity and that wisdom. I think about people in my life, because I've made a ton of mistakes. Obviously, you make mistakes as you grow up, and you make mistakes when you're older, and all these things. But there are mistakes of the youth, right, where it's just like based on experience, and there are adults around you that know you're making a mistake or that feel like they could offer you advice. And these people were so patient with me, Like I remember looking back and like, man, I said some really stupid things. Or I remember talking to my dad, like, yeah, what did you think when I said this, or wore my pants that way, or used my hair to cover my face that way, or some of the pictures that we've seen on this show. He's like, yeah, I just laughed. I knew you'd grow out of it. And like, that's kind of the hallmark of someone that has good advice to give, is that they know when to give it and when to just let the person kind of figure their way through whatever they're doing.
Yeah. Your dad just going to, oh, it's so tiring. Oh,
yeah. Britt should cut his hair, but he doesn't. And then, I didn't have any consequences really at that time. It was the cool thing to do, but you know what I'm saying? Like he's going to come crying to me later about how embarrassed he was about his emo hair. It's like, oh, my dad didn't have to do that. And he didn't do that. Yeah. Which is a sign of wisdom. And why I like to take my dad's advice.
Good advice there, to take your dad's advice.
Yes. All right. Moving on to other people's cringe posts. So I'm a big UFC fan, and I actually really like Derek Brunson as a UFC fighter. But he posted something, and there is no mercy here for even people of sports and UFC fighters that we like. So Derek posted, and this is in response to the Hunter Biden 4chan leak iCloud leak that came out. Basically, a bunch of photos and videos of Hunter Biden engaging in a ton of despicable, ugly, immoral, and illegal behavior came out. And Derek Brunson tweeted, "It's sad when people see Biden's son drug addiction video. They repost and celebrate. As a society, we need to learn to sympathize and be compassionate towards each other." And he does the emoji, and then keeping it 100 hashtag just the messenger. And I had to make sure that he wasn't trolling, because he kind of does do that sometimes, and he wasn't. And this is kind of the response I've seen a lot of people that don't really think through some things give. And of course, I agree. Like, as a society, as people, right? I want to be live in a sympathetic and compassionate society that orients people towards truth. That's really important. I think that, people that are reposting these photos or these images and rejoicing in someone else's suffering, or the women that Hunter Biden was taking advantage of, rejoicing in those circumstances, I think that's not a good thing. But I think it's good to post these things and say, hey, look, these elites live by a totally different rule set than you and I. The very laws that Joe Biden put on society with the 1990 crime bill, with all of the different drug policies he's put in place, mandatory minimums, all these things that he put other people's children, other people in jail, ruined other people's lives. He doesn't apply that to his own son, right? Even when he knows his son is doing it and his son gets away with it. And I think that's what people are so up in arms about, and why people are so interested in this, is that, hey, look, it's so clear, right? If you or I posted a video, or had a video and it got leaked that, we were taking hookers across street lines, and we were counting our meth on a scale, and we were brandishing firearms, and we were doing inappropriate things on camera, like, there would be some pretty severe consequences for us, up to and including maybe a SWAT team coming and dragging us away in the middle of the night. But for Hunter Biden, because he is an elite's son, somehow he gets away with it. And then on top of that, the media has been running coverage for him this entire time.
Yeah, I wonder where or when that stops being sympathetic, because you look at, for instance, the revelation of Trump's locker room talk, we'll say, to keep it family friendly, back in the 2015, 2016, because it was during the election cycle, if I recall correctly. And everyone was talking about how inappropriate that was. And what I would say is, yes, that's not appropriate behavior. I don't think locker room talk, I mean, I understand the emphasis of it. I still don't think that justifies how you should handle yourself, at least to a moral extent. But at what point why is that worse than what Hunter Biden's actually doing here in these actual, one is crude speech and the other one is horrible behavior. Now, if you're talking about treating Joe Biden and Donald Trump the same, there's a difference there for sure. But should you also not condemn the actions of Hunter Biden? Or is it because there's drug use involved that's when you need sympathy? Because he's somehow so far beyond his own accountable actions, that because he's on drugs, that then now it's a sad charity case. It's like, how about if you're going to preach being compassionate towards each other, then you need to apply it to every player. You can't just selectively choose when you're going to pull hey, you can't, rejoice in dirt being pulled up on my team. And then when, dirt on the other team, if that's how you want to look at it, comes up, then you're like, yeah, he's a terrible, horrible person. And so that's just one thing to me. But the other, the other aspect of it too is, I think most people, rejoicing about it, and maybe I haven't seen some of the more vile posts that are actually rejoicing in the fact that this happened. I think more of them are retweets saying, like, yeah, we told you so. Like, the Hunter Biden laptop story was real. You told us it wasn't. Here's the evidence. We were vindicated. We were right. And you guys are messed up and wrong for having suppressed this. And moreover, the broader implications, of course, leading to the Ukrainian intervention and Joe Biden's role in that. Because if you recall, with the Hunter Biden laptop story, there were also all of the ties about Hunter being appointed to Ukrainian boards and power and things like that, which has huge implications for the U.S. Sending money to Ukraine and trying to stage these interventions since 2014 in Russia. So, it's like there's kind of a trickle effect where it's like, sure, there might be a few people celebrating because this happened. and it's to someone they don't like because of a letter by their name. But I think more broadly speaking, it's because they were vindicated. More broadly, because it showed that there's a bigger problem here with Joe Biden and a conflict of interest.
Yeah, and I think that like you're saying, I have vindication because people have said, and we talked about the Hunter Biden laptop case, and it got buried, right? Twitter banned being able to share that on Twitter, and none of the news outlets other than the New York Post actually covered it. And what's going on is I think there are a lot of people that aren't they don't pay as much attention, right, to politics as you and I. And for one, I'm really glad about that, right? Like
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
good thing. And I wish that like we lived in a time and an era where basically who was president basically didn't affect what you did day to day, right? It was more local government that mattered more. But unfortunately, in the past 2 or 3 years, that has changed quite a bit, right? Like it used to go from, hey, it really only mattered if you were in the military or if you had someone, there's going to get into a war and your kid was going to get drafted, then the president matters, and they did their fair share of doing those types of things. But now, who's president basically determines whether you get to keep your job, whether you get to leave your state, leave your country, whether you get to move around freely in society. And so these type of people that haven't paid attention, need to start paying attention, right? And hopefully they start paying attention and realizing and opening their eyes to the fact that like there are two different rule sets, right? Rules for thee, but not for me. That happen at the elite level, and that's why people are posting these things. Like it's vindication that what we've been saying, that Joe Biden lives at a different standard. And for sure, I think Trump and basically every politician lives at a different standard than we do. And on top of their corruption and all this stuff, they want us to call them heroes, which makes them even more despicable to me. And so I hope that Derek Brunson, because he's a great fighter, and I think from what I've seen, seems like a pretty great person. I hope that his eyes are open and that his sense of truth is pointed in the right direction, and he realizes like no one's rejoicing in it, or the people that matter aren't rejoicing. We just are rejoicing in the fact that truth is being revealed.
Yep. I think compassion and sympathy is noble, but misguided if it is in spite of truth, right? If you're trying to emphasize sympathy and compassion over truth, and you're trying to bury truth through that, then it's not really sympathy and compassion in a real sense, because ultimately sympathy and compassion should lead towards reconciliation, and there's no real reconciliation without truth. And it sounds like a lot of cliche speak kind of things, but it really is true that you're not going to have an actual reconciliation of anything worthwhile unless it is grounded in reality, grounded in truth, and grounded in honesty between both parties or any parties involved. And so when you see something like this, it's often they're like, oh, we need to sympathize, be compassionate, because they want to bury truth, not because they want to uncover the truth. Once we come to terms, once we reconcile the implications and the treachery that actually has happened, and we fully unearth that, then maybe we can start to have some sympathy and compassion and heal. But you can't do that partially, because part of the way through, when it's just starting to get painful for one person.
Yep, absolutely. All right, moving on to our next one, we've got our frequent featured guest here, Robert Reich. And today is Amazon Prime Day. I don't know if anyone's bought anything cool. I haven't yet. I haven't even looked yet. I have everything that I want in my life. I have a beautiful wife and a house, and I feel good. But if you are one of those people and you've seen the advertisements for it, Robert Reich has a message for you. And he says, on Prime Day, remember that Amazon avoided about $5.2 billion in corporate federal income taxes in 2021. The real freeloaders in this country are corporations, not the poor. And here's the thing. It's almost accidentally based, right? Because he's not wrong, right? Like if we look at it from the perspective of the 2020 bailouts, right, where $6 trillion was given out freely to people that, were doing favors or received favors from politicians, then yeah, and I'm sure Amazon was part of that, right? I'm sure Amazon received a bunch of money from that stuff. And the poor, we received our $1,200 checks in the mail signed by Donald Trump, and we call it good. So in that instance, yes, there are definitely freeloaders. But Amazon is not a freeloader because they don't pay corporate income taxes. Amazon's a freeloader because they take advantage of taxes that are paid by other people. I would rather just all income taxes be taken away. Then there are no freeloaders at all. Everyone contributes to the, not to the tax base, but everyone contributes the amount of value that they bring to the marketplace in the first place. And even if we grant Robert Reich's premise, right, that more taxes is a good thing, it's like, would you rather there be an Amazon or not be an Amazon? From that perspective, it's like you would much rather there be an Amazon, because without Amazon, there are no, they don't have their thousands, tens of thousands of employees that are paying taxes. They don't have the tens of thousands of companies that create products that are sold on Amazon that also have employees that pay taxes, and they don't have all of the other ancillary inputs into those products and their employees that pay taxes on that stuff. So it's like, sure, Amazon didn't pay $5.2 billion in corporate federal income taxes, but I don't think you could actually calculate how much value, even from a tax standpoint, that Amazon existing brings to the United States. I wish that all that value was kept with, it could be reinvested into the companies, reinvested into Amazon. I think it's frankly pretty incredible that I can go on my computer, look at something that I want, push a button, and it's here, today or tomorrow at the latest. That's a lot of value, right? And I don't pay any extra shipping or anything like that. It's just, and that's what these guys don't understand, right? It's like such a greedy, self-serving mindset. Like they just see a pile of money that they don't get to have. Right. And they don't realize it's like, well, yeah, you don't get to have that money, but like, look at all this other stuff that was built because of this institution or this company existing.
Well, it seems like in their mind, money is the only quantifiable value until it isn't. So when they're talking about it, the only kind of value that Amazon can possibly provide would be tax dollars. That's the only value that they provide in this context. Therefore, they're a freeloader. Never mind the fact that Amazon does and creates all of these things that you and I would call value, and that most people would understand at least has value. And the idea of, in sort of a philosophical sense, the idea of taxes really is that you're trying to take value that people are hoarding, I guess from their perspective, you're taking money that's just being accrued in one place, and then you use that to provide services for those who would not otherwise benefit. That, I guess, is sort of the basic rough idea of taxation. Or you build things that are unique to the government that the private sector couldn't do, or whatever you have. But even from that framework, you have to recognize that the influx of cash isn't so that the government holds dollar bills. They can do that all they want with the Federal Reserve. The idea is that so that they hold some sort of value that they can channel into something else that creates value. So even the government is trying to, ostensibly in the best, scenario possible, it's trying to create value, and oftentimes it's purported to try to create unique value, like you say a military or social services for the poor that would allegedly never get made under the free market. But so, when thinking about it like that, you're trying to take value to redistribute it. But when you think about the amount of value that Amazon has provided to so many people and to so many small businesses and to so many consumers and individuals and small, like, there's no justifiable way to say that them not extracting more of their money is freeloading. Like you said, the only reasonable way to call Amazon a freeloader is in bailout money or government action that unfairly favors it in actual unique ways, like, for instance, through the, quote unquote, legitimate threat of force. That's the only real unique value that the government can provide in a society that believes in the threat of force from government, is this. And so the only freeloading that happens is when the government levies its power to give Amazon unique advantages. And then, because of that, Amazon does not have to compete fairly, or it gets a leg up, and therefore is freeloading. But when the government doesn't take value, that doesn't mean that Amazon is freeloading in at all. In fact, it's probably providing so many more services that the government might otherwise have to try to reproduce and create. You think about even the idea of Amazon doing their own shipping things. Now, they don't exclusively do it, but like if Amazon drone services become a thing, like the idea of remote drone service could actually take off, and remote delivery stuff could be hugely improved and hugely accessible for a great number of people. that currently have to, rely on really bad postal service because they don't, people don't want to pay that much to ship out there. So then you lose money on that. But the point is that Amazon would be providing a value at a better, more fast, more cheap way, not through taxes going into supporting a postal service. So the value that Amazon provides oftentimes is just a straight up better alternative to what the tax money that it would be going towards would create.
It's just funny you mentioned the drone service, and we had a guy when I was in university. He was like a director level guy at Amazon, and he was working on their warehouse and drone fulfillment system. And I don't know if this was true or is true. I'm just taking his word for it, but I know it's true in other ways. But he basically says, he's like, look, we've actually already solved how to do drone delivery to houses. We've already solved it, but there's so much red tape and litigation and laws that we have to go around. And so we have a full team of lawyers that are crafting, different types of laws and writing different propositions to the government and going back and forth with the government's lawyers that are paid from, right? That would be paid from this money that they're taking from us and taking from Amazon, right? So and whether that is true or not true, or whether that guy, had his hand on it or not, I don't know, because I haven't kept up with Amazon's drone delivery service, but I do know that that's true in a lot of other cases where innovation is actually held back. So the government will tax a business that is doing innovation and then use those dollars to keep that business from actually progressing in that innovation. So people talk about like, well, an unchecked free market. It's like, no, the free market succeeds despite the government pushing back down on it, right? We have all this innovation despite them, using our money and extorting it from us and trying to hold it back because, for whatever reason they have. I just think it's really ironic, right? Like that $5.2 billion would not be used to better Americans' lives. It would be used to enforce more red tape, increase the bureaucracy and the administrative state.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is a little bit more addressing your, the freeloading through subsidy point. Robert Reich had another tweet a couple days ago where he lists off a bunch of different industries. Another almost accidentally based one, where he's, is like the oil industries and the insurance companies and the pharma buy off Congress and there's no action on all these things. And then he says like money in politics is the root of our dysfunction. And it's like he listed off, this industry buys off Congress. This industry buys off Congress. This industry buys off Congress.
What is the common denominator?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, yeah. It's money. Definitely it's money, not Congress. And in the same way you think about, okay, so Amazon's freeloading. Well, if a kid beats up another kid at the playground, takes his lunch money, and then hands it to his friend who didn't do anything to help but was maybe standing by watching. Yeah, the guy who stood by watching sucks. But wouldn't you rather solve the problem and stop the kid who's actually going to beat up the other kid and take the money rather than the onlooker? And obviously, in corporations and politics, it's a little bit more reciprocal, exchanges. But the start and the root of the power really is the political threat of violence that allows you to take money from people and then allows you to put other people in power to help each other out. And so I think in the same way where, this one's so close, I think that other one was just so close, but just remember that, yes, it sucks that Amazon would take bailout money. Yeah, it sucks that other industries are taking bailout money. Let's stop giving them that money to begin with. Let's stop letting them be able to receive that money. Let's because the other stupid thing about that is, again, as I was talking about, money is just a shorthand for value. It's attempting to quantify value of some sort. And so it's like, let's take money out of the equation, or Amazon's avoiding all these taxes and they're not contributing. It's such a short-term, dumb idea that like money is the thing that people are after when really it's just an exchange of value. And when you think about it in that way, well, then of course you can't get rid of money in politics. No, you can't get rid of value in politics. You can't get rid of favors. You can't get rid of power unless you delete the unfair power structure to begin with.
Totally agree. All right. Our next one is a comic. And this is a reminder, if you guys want to take a look at this, if you're listening, cringepost.com, visual show companion. This is a comment by Andy Singer, and it's got a picture of a bunch of cars all packed on a highway, and it goes, quote, public investment. and then it has a nice sunny picture of, some sort of train or tram, and it, in other quotes, wasteful subsidy. And I mean, this hits on a few things, that we've talked about, like who would build the roads, right? Like, because they still see this all as whether it's public transport or the highways, who's going to build them? It's the government. That's the obvious answer that has to be built. And people always will bring up like who will build the roads, and we've kind of gone into that before. Like how it was Domino's had they paved roads because they needed safe roads for their drivers to be on. We've solved, the free market has solved way more complex problems than, laying tar, and pavement. And if you just look at, parking lots, which are what tar and pavement, and they're planned out, and businesses pay to have those things developed and plan them out, I think they could probably solve highways and roads to get people to come to their business. The thing that's funny though, go for it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just on the aesthetic thing, I just love that they're showing all the cars polluting and then a bright little sun on the on the thing there.
Yeah,
it's just classic comic stuff.
It's propaganda, man. It's propaganda.
Yeah.
And it's not even funny, right?
Yeah.
Like I've seen things that I disagree with, but they're funny, right? Because they at least get an aspect of the truth, and they might get it wrong, but it's like, at least it's like engaging in it. This is just pure, like, I have a message I want to get across. But the thing about like public transport, and you probably know more about this than I do with where you work and everything, but like Sound Transit, right? Like, the government manages Sound Transit and takes billions of dollars from Washington residents every year to spend on this thing. And then they planned like some sort of expansion. They were hoping that, rider fares would cover, I think it was like 30% or something like that of the operating cost. Like, that's what they estimated it was going to be. And that's how they plan. Like, for one, how ridiculous of any business or entity to think, hey, only 30% of our operating cost is going to be covered by people using it. Like, that by definition is wasteful, right? By definition, you are using more than you are putting into it. And then two, they were still wrong, right? I think it was like 5% of their operating costs is covered by fares, whether it's due to them going over budget or they just don't enforce the fares, probably a bunch of both. And so it's really hard to like, the reason government is so wasteful is because no one actually has ownership. No one has any accountability. And when they fail, it's because they didn't have enough money. So they ask for more.
Yeah. Well, for a great example of that is, Sound Transit 3 is kind of the shorthand for this expansion of Sound Transit that was voted on. And in the beautiful, democratic process, three counties back in, I want to say 2016, I think, voted on this. It was in Washington State, it was Pierce, Snohomish, and King counties. And Pierce and Snohomish are kind of, I don't know exactly the numbers, but they're pretty even between conservative and liberal, Republican, Democrat. And then King is overwhelmingly Democrat. It's the, where Seattle is and stuff. And so King voted, both, Snohomish and Pierce rejected it by majorities, but King supported it by enough margins to overrule the two. So we all have to pay for this thing. Yeah. So, which is beautiful example of democracy. What counts in democracy, by the way? Is it because, is it counties? Is it just individual people votes? I don't know. If it's about individuals, you'd think they'd respect the individual choice, but who am I to know? Anyway, so they voted this through, and we're told it was going to cost like, I want to say 50 billion, something like that. Like, I don't even remember the initial projection. I could pull it up here. But point being, this year they have now announced that without adding any new services, it will cost double what they projected it will. And it will be delayed by another year for implementation. So, when you're talking about, like paying more for worse outcomes, that's a great example. The other great example is on the east side of the state, there's their transit. And I'm pretty sure this is true across the state, but I know at least on the east side, there was a study we did where ridership has just, even prior to COVID, has continued to drop year by year, plummeting. And because of that, they're raising taxes and taking more money to fund it. So, government is, as the saying goes, I think it's often used with government schools, but it's like, in this case, with transit, government's the only place where you can fail and get more money for it, right? when ridership fares go down, when less people are and fewer people are using your service, that means you need to improve it, you need to adjust to meet their needs, or you need to make it cheaper. Instead, government doubles down, takes more taxpayer money, and then it says we're going to expand this even more. And the last thing I'll say about this, to before I shut up, the thing about public investment, I have these great numbers in front of me, based on sort of the Puget Sound Regional Council, again Washington specific, but you can kind of extrapolate from here. They're spending 65% of spending goes on transit, or about what they spend in terms of these certain tax revenues from gases and stuff. 8% of people use that to travel, maybe, and that includes ferries. Okay, 8%, 65% of the budget goes to 8% of the population, versus 13% that gets spent on highways, which are projected to carry 72% of travelers. So it's like almost inverse there. 65% of the budget goes to the 8% of this kind of transit, and that includes ferries, which I would argue are a more unique purpose than other public transit.
I mean, I think a lot of people use those too, right? That bumps that number up.
Right. So 65 to 8% versus 72% of the people who use highways, 13% goes to that. Now, sure, there could be different cost needs for those different things, but if you've been in Washington State, you know that highway expansion would be nice. But here's the great thing about it. The government has the power of things like eminent domain, which are terrible and awful, and they still can't manage to use it in the right way. They still muck it up. They tore down this place in, I think, Federal Way, this awesome laser tag place that I used to go growing up, party place. Yeah, guess what? Never got built. They tore it down because they used eminent domain, never built the thing there.
Yeah, they got the cheat codes and they still lose. It's wild, exactly. Man. They can put, it's like if you're playing a video game, they've got God mode on and somehow they keep failing the mission. I just don't want them to have any cheat codes whatsoever in the first place. Exactly. I think your point about like revenue being feedback, like any other person, business entity out there takes feedback from whatever they're doing and then adjusts accordingly. And you would think that, hey, if our fares are actually a sixth of what we are projecting, and what we were projecting doesn't even it covers barely a third of what we need to operate, you would think, oh man, like maybe we're not doing something right. Maybe we need to change what we're doing. Why are people not wanting to ride public transit? And but that's with government, it can never be that way. It can never be introspective, right? And that's the big difference between business and government. Is business is forced, the revenue and the profits forces a business to look internally and say, what are we doing that is causing us to fail? What are we doing that's not meeting market needs? How are we not making people happy and making their lives better? Whereas government looks outward and says, hey, why aren't you using this service more? Why aren't you paying more taxes? Why aren't you becoming better people and caring more about the environment to use public transit? I actually wouldn't have an issue with using more sustainable methods of transit. I just don't want to get knifed on a public transit bus, right? Because these things are not enforced, right? And they're dirty, they stink, they run late. You can't actually rely on them. So why am I would rather trust a car, as like you're saying, 72% of other people would as well.
Well, and then just the last thing, just the very real, the very reality of roads and highways have so much more flexibility than rail does. And guess what? People like freedom. People like taking spontaneous exits on the freeway to check out what's on a random stop. Like, people don't want to be hemmed in. And if you were to make stops for every single exit, think about how slow that rail would actually be, waiting for people to unboard. That wouldn't be tenable. So you have to make these rails either only for dense urban areas or long, very long stretches like Portland to Seattle type stuff, which is fine. And I think there's an actual market for those things. But it's not, you can't artificially pump those up like the government wants to, because you still need individual travel. And I'm not saying cars are the answer forever. I think technology will continue to innovate, and then we will solve congestion. I really do. I don't think cars are the final solution, in the same way that, in the past, people thought, there's nothing that could replace animals because they're just so naturally quick. I think there will be some sort of solution, and I just don't want the government sinking in and making everyone less efficient in the meantime to getting there.
Yep. All right, moving on to our next one. Who posted this? Was it Pierce County Republican Party?
It was not. I can find the Twitter account. I had to double check. My brother, shout outs to him, sent it, and I'm like, dude, David, there is no way this is.
I mean,
real.
but this is pretty representative of a pretty Republican.
I know.
Base.
It seemed so just like goofy, and he's like, no, it's real, and he sent me the link, and
like and share.
I was gonna say I didn't include the like for Trump, ignore for Biden.
No,
with Donald Trump with the American flag and Biden with the China flag behind him.
Oh my gosh!
But this is a true believer account.
Okay,
not verified,
so this post,
it's a true believer.
This post has a picture of a bunch of kids with their hands over their hearts and they are smiling. And it says, Florida schools are forcing students to stand during the national anthem. If you support this, please like and share. You know, I haven't had to say the Pledge of Allegiance in a long time. And we were at a university thing, like a kind of like a business networking thing. And my wife and I, and in the middle of it, or right before the event started, after the networking was over, they said, hey, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever. And everyone, like drones, just turns and faces this flag and puts their hands over their heart and drones on with like, I pledge allegiance to the flag. And literally like that. And it's like, it really hit me as like, wow, this is so weird. And I'm not going to say it, and I'm not going to say it ever again. And you know, people... I was having discussions with some family members about this over the 4th of July because, like, yeah, that was just hella weird, you know, like that we do that, especially if you adhere to like Christianity, right, where it's like you shall not have other idols before God. Like, it's like you believe in a higher power, and I guess if your religion is the state, then it's good. But ironically, the people that deify the state the most are also against this, so it's kind of a weird thing. But could you imagine, like, if we lived in a slightly different, and this is Tom Woods, analogy, if like we lived in a country that was controlled by Walmart, and anytime in school or church or at a sporting event, they raised the Walmart flag and you had to pledge allegiance to the Walmart flag. And then when you go to public school that's funded by Walmart, but they take your money to fund it, there's pictures of all the different Walmart presidents on the wall, and you're supposed to venerate them and view them as, almost like godlike and infallible. And there's everything you have, you owe to those people. It sounds kind of like, North Korea or Stalinist Russia or something like that. Yet we are doing it here, and for some reason, people are on autopilot and they do it.
The thing is, I think a lot of people, they grew up with it, and it's so normal, it's so ingrained in just their, the routine of everything, that they almost impose their own values onto it, right?
Yeah.
So you might talk about it with someone, and they might say something, well, no, it's like, I'm just doing it as a sign of respect for the values of the country or for people who've sacrificed to defend, whatever, what you have. But I think that the key word here to me is Florida schools are forcing students to stand during the national anthem.
Yeah.
Like, if you support this, like and share. And if you're ever supporting a force like that, you really need to examine yourself to be like, is that really right? Do you really want a government institution forcing your kids to do something without your say in it, and they don't have the freedom to not, like, that to me is big. Like, I have my problems with the Pledge of Allegiance as well. I think I don't like it either. I think it's weird, but I at least, if there are people who are, again, imposing their own meaning on it, and they're not swearing fealty to a flag or to a government, okay, fine. You're doing it as sort of a symbol of respect for the values or the principles that okay, I can get over that. But even then, why should you want to force kids to say that, let alone have them be forced, again, by a government entity? It makes me think of the Emo Phillips joke, which was, I think it's Emo Phillips. He says it, in his very dry manner, something like, the body's an interesting thing. The brain used to be my favorite part of the body, and then I thought, wait a minute, look who's telling me that, as the joke.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, that's kind of how I feel about this, where it's like, if you wanted to tell your kids, hey, look, you should respect the government, I'd be like, that's kind of weird. But you should definitely think it's weird when the government says, hey, I'm the government, you should respect the government, you should venerate me. That should make you at least think, I don't,
Something
maybe
weird
I
going
want,
on.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I want them to teach my kid discipline, but they shouldn't be forced to. Force should not come into the equation whatsoever.
Speaking of force, we're moving on to our last one. Um, we've got a picture of some blocks of cheese in a grocery store for $3.99. It looks like, and the caption and these blocks of cheese have those typical security spider things on them that wrap around, and basically, if you buy these things, you take it to the front, and then the cashier is able to unlock them. So that way, when you walk out, alarms aren't going off.
It's kind of like what a lot of clothing will have on it, but it's a little bit more contained, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's stuck on the cheese. And the caption reads, "Effing really?" ? And then 2 comments under it. One person says, "It says a lot that the government, companies, and police forces are funneling money and resources into this, as opposed to doing all they can to keep food actually affordable." And then another person comments below, "The $25 spent on the spider is 5 more $5 blocks of cheese. 100 spiders times 100 stores buys a lot of cheese for hungry people, and that's just one item." Okay. I mean, there's a lot to go on in this one. I think my favorite line though is it says that the government, companies, and police forces, it says a lot about them, that they're funneling money and resources into security measures as opposed to keeping food affordable for everyone else, as if people being able to steal food makes it affordable for everyone else. You know what happens when a store loses product that they are not able to make any money on or revenue on? They actually have to make up that revenue, hopefully they can, by charging more to their other customers, right? So the people that aren't willing to steal are actually paying the price for people that are stealing, right? So the only reason a store would put, stores tolerate a certain level of theft, right? They just understand that comes with the territory. It's going to happen. But there are certain items, if they're stolen enough, that could actually sink the store, and they actually might have to charge more and more and more for those items to cover the costs and the losses. And so when that kind of calculus is made, they actually end up having to put security measures in place, because it's cheaper to put security measures in place than it is to, either increase prices or to just, accept the loss. And so that's why you see expensive items like video games or drills or anything like that being locked up. And I guess for some reason in this city or store, blocks of cheese that are $3.99 are a really hot commodity. And the store is actually doing the average person a favor, right? They're doing the average person a favor because they're making it actually and keeping it affordable for everyone else around them, as opposed to making us eat the cost of the increased security or the increased losses.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about this, so you might have a little bit more insight. But generally speaking, cheese is probably one of those items that a grocery store is usually going to keep at cost, where they don't make a ton of profit off, right? So
loss leader.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't remember the term. And so that's, I mean, for one thing, like if your necessities are those ones that, if that's a common theft, like that really is going to hurt, because you're already not making a profit on it. But now you're paying for something that's not a profit generator, but you need that thing to, you need to draw people in for these things to be renewable. If you raise your prices, every other store around you is going to have a leg up, because it's specifically not an item that you're generally making profit on, would be my, assumption. But the other funny thing is, like, just from an ignorance standpoint, I did a quick Google search because it seems so obvious to me, but those spider wraps are reusable. So that's just really stupid. On the $25 spent on the spider is 5 more $5 blocks of cheese. I mean, do you really think that like they would spend $25 to protect a one-time use of of a single block of cheese? Like, no. And the other ignorant, highlight is in the comment before, where it says a lot that the government, companies, and police forces are funneling money and resources into this. Do you think the government or the police department is buying spiders for a grocery store?
They do not care.
No.
If they actually enforced it, they might not have to do it.
Right. What I'm saying? Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. The government is telling the police officers, hey, don't the police officers are telling the store employees, hey, don't tackle that person or else we'll arrest you if they steal from you. Don't stop a thief. And the government's telling the police, by the way, if you, steal or if you catch a thief, probably should just let him go and it won't be. So it's like this really cycle of ineffectiveness. So it's so bizarro that this person is like, oh, the government is, they're doing things like funneling money into keeping the store owners happy. And it's like, no, the store is fronting this cost. This is entirely on the store owner, which then leads you to the realization that, of course, it wouldn't be $25 spent on a single block of cheese because that's not profitable, because unlike the government, stores have to work within the bounds of reality. They have to bring in more than they spend. And then, of course, the other aspect is when they're talking about how government and police forces are funneling into this instead of keeping food actually affordable. Yeah, you know what would have been one of those things that would have kept food affordable? Probably not locking down the economy and telling people that they can't go to their jobs. Probably not raising taxes on CO2 emissions like they're doing in Washington that are going to raise prices on fuel and diesel. That is how, 99% of these kinds of foods are transported. And transportation costs mean higher prices overall. So there's like a million different things that the government does and makes things worse. And then people say, wow, the government should really step in here and do something because this is crazy. It's like, look, if you think that putting spiders on blocks of cheese is the biggest affront to a civilized society, don't look into what the government did during 2020. Don't look at what that did to the costs of food. Don't look at what that did to bailing out big businesses and companies. You're gonna get heartbroken if you think that it's a shame that they're protecting their cheese.
I really it kind of blows my mind that they blow past the reason why the store is doing this. Like, let's grant them their stupid math that it costs $25 for a $5 piece of cheese, to do it. They feel like they have to do that because, not that they feel it, they have to do that because all that cheese would be gone if they didn't. That means there are people stealing it. Aren't those the people that are in the wrong? Aren't those the people that you should be criticizing? Like, they are the ones that are, making someone put effort and time and money and value into creating that block of cheese. Whether it was the people building the production facility or the people that raised the cows, or built the dairies, all those people put effort into doing that. And someone just thought, hey, I'm going to come in there. I'm not going to contribute anything to the production of this, and I'm just going to take it. And that is way worse than a store thinking, hey, I need to kind of protect it. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with protecting your property. It's kind of like those, it reminds me of the arguments that people make about like, well, if you have a gun at your house and someone breaks in, like, you shouldn't shoot them. Like, no one's life is worth less than your property. And it's like, no, the person breaking in values their life less than my property, right? They're willing to risk their life to try and take something from me that I invested my life and time and value into. It's like the emphasis is on the wrong person and the wrong, like, the villain is clearly there, but for some reason you're not even acknowledging them or that they exist. And it's just, I don't know, man. It's a really weird, like, it's a weird cultural phenomenon, right? Like, these people that are so hyped up on sustainability or green whatever, like, don't also understand that there's a reality that you have to live in where business has to be sustainable, right? Food doesn't just arrive on the shelves, right? Like, it is grown, made, processed, shipped, driven, packed, unpacked, and then kept cool and stored, and then processed again when it's being checked out. Like, all those costs, all of those people are wrapped up, and somehow they can get away with selling it for $3.99, right? They can deliver that much value to you for $3.99. Like, just pay the gosh darn money, and they don't have to pay. Then they don't have to pay for the $25 spider on top of all that other infrastructure.
Yeah, I think there's this romanticization, if that's the word. Maybe not. But of the thief, it's always the Jean Valjean stealing the brick of cheese for his dying sister. Who's and frankly, people who are in those dire straits, most often, people who are looking to actually improve and there are resources for them. It's not perfect, but the biggest problem, people would say, oh, there's not enough resources to go around for that. And it's like, well, there's not enough resources for all of the people who have to steal or who are homeless, because the vast majority of them don't want to get better and improve. The people who are willing to put in effort and to get better and to, provide and try to do that, they have resources available to them and they do well, generally speaking. It's not always the case, and there are exceptions. I get that. But the people who are stealing bricks of cheese in the grocery store, by and large, are not the kinds of people who are trying to better themselves. They are often the kinds of people who are rather, choosing to live a lifestyle like that versus not. Like, sometimes it's a tragic case of someone losing their job, but the vast majority of cases are people who choose drugs and they prioritize that over making wise decisions. It's tragic, it's sad, but it's also something where you can't, even if you bought into this guy's, let's just pay for 5 blocks of cheese to give to hungry people. You do that, and then what? They need another block of cheese the next day. And then what? And then what? And then what? It's not a matter of giving someone this one life-changing brick of cheese, And so the kinds of people that are stealing like this most of the time are people who are choosing to prioritize their own selfish habits of whether that was a drug consumption that's led to an awful addiction, or just laziness, and they don't want to work to get out. And sometimes it's really hard and it's not fair. And that sucks. And it should be infinite number of charities that we can do and to help provide for these people. But it's not the responsibility of a grocery store. And 2, it's not within the capacity of the government to do. So everyone targeted in this is just the wrong actor for this kind of thing. And I believe in being personally generous as much as you can. That doesn't mean being generous with other people's money.
You got to be generous in such a way that you can be generous in the future, right? And that's the whole problem with the guy's last line. 100 spiders times 100 stores buys a lot of cheese for hungry people, and that's just one item. It's like, okay, by one item, do you mean they should give every item in their store away until there are no more stores ever? And then after that's all done, I mean, everyone's fat and happy until the store goes away, right? That's the point of a charity and sustainability, right? A charity you have to be generous in such a way that you're actually a good steward of it so that you can continue to be generous into the future. And that's, like we talked about with the transit deal, like that's the whole problem with government being benevolent, is that there's no feedback to actually understand whether it's being sustainable. So that way, they just require more and more money from people who are actually being productive to keep on going.
Yeah, well, and not only when you were saying that, it also made me think, if you're, let's say you have 100 stores giving away 100 bricks of cheese every day. It's like, does that mean that regular paying customers lose access to that cheese? And if so, how do you choose who receives the cheese? And now you have the government in the distribution business of giving away the cheese, and now we've got cheese lines. But it's okay, because cheese lines, I'm sure, just like bread lines, fostered community, like in Soviet communist Russia.
Yeah. Bernie Sanders' favorite. Awesome. Well, friends, thanks for hanging out with us during the show. We had a good time. And again, just to ask you, like, share, and subscribe, comment, message us. All of that stuff is good and helps us get the message out. And we will catch you again next time.